This is episode 69 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. Today, I'd like to welcome Elly Bacon. Elly loves connecting with people. She has a proven, strong skill set at building strong community relationships and partnerships to further the economic development of businesses throughout Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. She is passionate about meeting new people and learning about what they do to connect them with the right opportunities. Elly has more than 15 years experience of building and delivering new and existing community programs. She's a successful project manager who can do more with less, and she often juggles multiple projects at the same time. Community outreach has always been a big part of her role. She currently is on the board for the Opportunity Council, which is an all-volunteer organization whose emphasis is on the commitment to the success of Colorado's business community by bringing public and private sector powerhouses face-to-face with talent to grow their vendor partnerships. She's also on the advisory councils for Denver Public Schools Business Development Outreach, Denver Water's Small Minority Women Business Enterprise Committee, and Regional Transportation District's Small and Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Advisory Council. And she was instrumental in starting Chamber's Young Professionals Group. Elly, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Katrina.
So my first question, oh my gosh, how do you have time for this? Talk about juggling. What is the secret?
Well, there's 24 hours in the, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. So Elly doesn't sleep. Okay, good.
No, it's just, you find time when you're passionate about things.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's part of, managing life. You pick and choose what your balance is that day. I don't think there's ever going to be a, 50-50 split. I firmly believe that, some days it'll be more one way and some days it will be more the other. And you just, as long as you're passionate about it, it's easier to do.
Yeah. How did you find your passion, or did you always know you were passionate about helping disadvantaged entrepreneurs or small businesses, or where did that stem from?
I think I kind of just fell into it. My father has always been part of the community. He and my mother owned their own business, and they were always active in the community, and he was sitting on boards and he would take me places. And I just think that that's kind of where it started. And that's actually how I got my first job at the Women's Chamber. Was he took me to a networking function and we got talking, and a few months later they called and asked if I wanted to come and interview. So I think it's just a family passion.
That's really interesting. So I've heard this term recently, and I think you fall into this bucket. Have you heard the term intrapreneur?
You're actually the first one who's ever used that with me, so I had to look it up.
Yeah, well, I heard it. You know who I heard it from was Megan at Charter. She was, yeah. So, and she was describing herself as an entrepreneur. And basically what that means is it's someone who works for a larger company or organization, but their mindset and what they do within the company is very entrepreneurial. And I think it definitely applies to Megan. I think it definitely applies to you. But what I wanted to ask you on that is, of course, the larger organizations that you work for they have goals and they have visions for where they're going. But I'd love to know, your insight on how you feel like you move that project along in a way you want it to move forward. Do you have a process for that, or does it just kind of happen because of all of your Elly magic that you bring to everything?
Well, I think some of it is just taking the next step. Is probably the easiest way to talk about it. Is someone comes to you and they say, "This is what I'm really interested in doing," or "I don't know how to get involved or get in front of," and just logically, you just need to take the next step. And so figuring out what the next step looks like is always going to be different. So sometimes it's interesting to watch companies come up with these huge strategic plans and how they're going to move them forward. But life doesn't always work that way. And so it's just being able to take a deep breath and be like, well, that's not working that way, but this opportunity is coming. So let's just jump in and see how we can be effective and move it forward that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is always interesting when you look at big strategic plans, like what had to shift and pivot within that to get to that end result. I think that's always interesting to look back from like a 2020 perspective.
Exactly.
So much of what you do, so you're juggling so many projects all day, every day, but a big part within that truly is relationship building with vendors, with suppliers, with community organizations. I think you are so skilled at this and a master of relationships. What would you say are some of your biggest tips for making authentic connections? Because I know so many people go to events and they walk up, they introduce themselves, they say what they do, and it's so much of like a hard sell right out of the gate where they still don't know the person, or what is needed. So what do you say to that? What do you do different?
Well, business is obviously based on relationships, and you should never be the product. I really believe that in order to build a relationship, you actually have to care about the person and who they are. And I feel that if you give more than you receive, that you actually learn more and you can build those relationships. Because if I don't know anything about you as a person, I really, I can't move forward. So I love the stories, like how people get into things, or, why they become passionate in it makes it easier for them in the long run to sell their product. So if I meet you at a deal and the first thing you say is, oh, my name is so-and-so and this is what I do, here's my card, give me a call, I'm probably not going to remember anything about you. But maybe you tell me a story about how you got laid off and you were pregnant and you just needed to figure out something to do and you just kind of jumped in and held your breath. I'm going to remember that story much longer than I'm going to remember that you gave me a blue business card.
Right. I think it kind of goes back to that authenticity piece, too, like getting to know someone and being authentic about that so that they can remember you. I think that's really smart.
When people don't like to be felt as, kind of like meat, right? So they want you to see them as a person. And so if you see them as a means to an end, it doesn't make them feel very special.
Right. What would you say is like one thing that, like, is someone you met, whether they, I don't know, sent you a gift or you met them at an event, or like, what is one thing that made someone stand out to you? Like, is it that story? Do you like, I don't know if that story was an actual one. But I'm just thinking from a relationship building standpoint, what can be done there? Or is it just kind of over time, like sharing those stories and getting to know people as the person that they are?
I think it's kind of a mixture. There's some people whose story is so off the wall, like truth is always stranger than fiction. So there's always going to be that one crazy story that you remember, like, really, like, I can't believe that's not a video or a top movie.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it's the little things that help you build and keep those relationships.
Right.
Like remembering that someone is, maybe their child is going in for surgery, or sending them a little note that helps them remember you. And on the flip side, it makes them feel special. So that's part of their story. They're not just the product, they're not just the company. They're, there's a huge reason behind it. And I think to build that in the long run is what makes people successful. You'll always have that one person who, my favorite one is, there's a woman that I met and she just randomly ended up accidentally crashing a party because she got on the wrong elevator.
Oh, that's That's
So
awesome.
I will always remember that story because she got off and she went up to the bar to order a drink, and she's like, "Do you need my credit card?" And they said, "Well, no, it's all covered." And she goes, "Okay." And she turns around and she ends up sitting next to the mayor.
Oh, that's amazing.
And he's telling these stories and they just hit it off. And I'll always remember it because she's like, all that happened was that I got off on the wrong elevator.
Oh my gosh. And isn't that so serendipitous? Good for her for getting off on the wrong floor.
Right. So, I mean, that's always a story that you'll always remember because talk about just random. Like,
Yeah.
couldn't figure out where her friend was, and she ends up making all these great business connections because
Oh, that's awesome.
she just wasn't paying attention.
And I love that she just kind of went with it too. She's like, well, I'm here, you know, this looks pretty good.
I know, I love that. So, I mean, that's obviously a story that I always remember because it's so funny.
Yeah, I love that.
But, you know, the other ones have always been, we built it over time and, you know, so I think it's both ways.
Yeah. Brene Brown, do you know who that is? She's an author. She has a couple of New York Times bestsellers about being, what are they called? Daring Greatly. And then there's one about uh, vulnerability. I can't think of all of her titles. But she says owning our story and loving ourselves through the process is one of the bravest things we'll ever do. And I think a lot of times in business, I feel like sometimes I feel like we're almost pressured to either whitewash the story of why we started the business, particularly if it is around like a negative thing, like a layoff or something like that. But I love this because I do think being vulnerable and sharing that real story is compelling, and it is memorable and authentic, and you know, we're all people, and it's a great way to connect with someone.
Well, and I feel that people learn the most out of their mistakes.
Yeah, yeah.
And if the only story you ever tell is everything that's gone right in your life,
Right.
it's misconstruing because you don't learn anything if you don't have those hiccups and if you don't make those mistakes. So, you know, to own it and say, yeah, I was laid off, you know, whether it's because you did something stupid like you were always late, or to something as easy as, you know, the company was merging with another one and they, you know, laid off the North American side of the house. Like, but you learn something from it, and that's where people can learn from you.
Right. What would you say? So speaking of mistakes, let's go down that path. So what's one mistake that you're willing to share with us that you did that you feel like you've learned from and grown from?
Oh God, that list is probably so long.
I know. We just keep making those mistakes, right? Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. I think part of it is asking enough questions.
Oh, okay.
You know, because you get so excited about something that you just jump in.
Right.
Which is not always a bad thing, but sometimes you need to ask extra questions. And knowing that now, I would say, is actually probably a good thing because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so if you're too embarrassed to ask the questions, that's a problem. If you don't know to ask the questions, that's probably also going to be a problem.
Right.
But on the flip side, like sometimes you'll get yourself into some really uncomfortable waters if you don't think to ask any questions at all. So be curious. And I learned that probably really early on in my career. And I still sometimes forget and am reminded that I need to ask more questions instead of just assuming that I understood what was going on.
Right. I think that's so true and valuable for all of our listeners. We can all ask more questions because a lot of times, like without getting those clarifying questions, like, has this been done before? Is there someone on the team who, you know, is taking a piece of this? Whatever it is, those clarifying questions really help paint the picture of what the end vision is too, and can help get you there much more easily.
Yes, exactly.
What would you say, so as we wrap up, what would you say is one thing that's on your radar as an industry expert in the supplier diversity space, or economic development space, however you want to look at it, that you think is a trend that the rest of us will maybe be talking about in a year or two from now? Like what's kind of a hot topic?
That's actually kind of interesting. I just learned actually the other day that the mining industry is moving towards diversifying their board of directors more, which I think is so needed. And it's always an interesting conversation because we don't have enough diversity on boards. And having an all male or an all female board, I don't think is successful because you need everyone's viewpoint.
Right.
And I think one of the most interesting things that somebody had said to me was, well, there's just not enough women in mining to make this successful. And it surprised me because women on boards is so important, one, but two, expecting everyone that sits on a board to be an industry wizard,
right,
isn't realistic either. So, you have to have people that can complement each other and can bring other things to the table. And once again, it's having those questions and those conversations. So I think we're going to start seeing more and more companies moving towards diversifying their boards and their committees and so forth, because they need a bigger pool to become more successful.
I love that. And what I love about that is it's not just diversifying male or female or ethnicity, but it's also diversifying industry. And I think that is such an incredible point to make, that if you're on a mining board, you don't have to be a mining wizard necessarily, but maybe you bring this other sort of expertise to the table to look at things from a different perspective.
Well, I hope it moves that direction.
Yeah, right.
If I have my way, it will. No, just kidding.
Hey, we have to put it out there in order for it to happen. So,
exactly.
Anyway, thanks, Elly, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Katrina.
You're welcome.